Tonight, the world is stunned by a bold and unexpected decision from Africa. In an era where global leaders hesitate to take risks, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré has stepped into the spotlight with a move that directly challenges some of the most powerful players on the world stage. Reports confirm that Traoré has ordered the dispatch of a humanitarian aid ship bound for Gaza. For a continent long defined by its struggles under Western pressure, this single act has ignited a storm of political, diplomatic, and even military concern. The decision comes at a time when the conflict in Gaza has captured headlines worldwide. Nations have condemned the humanitarian crisis, but very few leaders have risked real action. Traoré has not only spoken, but acted. By sending an aid ship, he has transformed Burkina Faso's role from a peripheral observer into a central actor in one of the world's most heated geopolitical confrontations. It is a signal to his people, to Africa, and to the world that his nation is not afraid to defy the expectations of larger powers. This is not a symbolic gesture. Sources close to his administration indicate that the vessel is loaded with food, medicine, and essential supplies desperately needed by civilians trapped in Gaza. But humanitarian aid is never just about boxes and crates. It is about politics, alliances, and influence. And this move forces us to ask, is this about helping the people of Gaza? Or is it also a challenge to the dominance of the West and Israel in shaping Middle Eastern outcomes? Reaction from Israel has been swift and uneasy. Officials in Tel Aviv are already raising concerns about what else could be on board this aid ship. Could it be more than food and medicine? Could it be a cover for something greater? These suspicions, whether grounded or not, are already sparking debate in Washington, London, and Brussels. Because if a small African nation can defy pressure and act independently, what message does that send to other nations on the fence? The symbolism is powerful. For decades, Western powers have positioned themselves as the arbiters of humanitarian aid. Yet here is Traoré, standing on the global stage, taking matters into his own hands. It is not America sending the ship. It is not the European Union. It is not the United Nations. It is Burkina Faso. That fact alone is shaking the confidence of leaders who rely on the narrative that Africa should follow, not lead. Inside Burkina Faso, the reaction has been electric. Crowds have taken to the streets in support, waving flags, chanting slogans, and praising their president as a defender of justice. Social media is flooded with images of citizens celebrating the announcement. For a nation that has endured poverty, instability, and decades of outside interference, this act has given the people something far more valuable than just headlines. It has given them pride. But pride can come at a cost. Analysts warn that Traoré may have opened a dangerous front. Western governments are likely already drafting measures, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or worse. Israel has not ruled out the possibility of intercepting the ship. If that happens, the world could see a direct confrontation between a small African nation and a regional military powerhouse. What would such a clash mean for international law, for Africa's standing, and for the balance of global power? In Washington, officials are alarmed. The United States has long depended on African compliance to maintain its influence across the globe. But if Burkina Faso succeeds in sending aid to Gaza, this could inspire other African nations to follow. Could this be the beginning of an African foreign policy independent of Washington's dictates? Could it mark the rise of a new bloc, where African nations assert not only sovereignty at home but moral leadership abroad? Critics, however, are quick to remind us of the risks. They argue that Burkina Faso, already struggling with economic and security challenges, cannot afford to provoke powerful adversaries. Some even question whether this aid ship will reach its destination, or whether it will become a pawn in a much larger power game. Is Traoré's gamble an act of courage, or is it reckless brinkmanship that will leave his nation vulnerable? Yet, whatever the risks, one fact remains undeniable. Traoré has forced the world to pay attention. By defying silence, he has elevated his country's voice on an issue of global importance. He has transformed himself into a symbol, not just of African independence, but of African defiance. As the ship prepares to sail, eyes across the globe are watching. Will it reach Gaza's shores? Will it be blocked or intercepted? And more importantly, will this act inspire a new wave of resistance against Western dominance in Africa and beyond? This is not just about one ship. It is about a new narrative. A small nation daring to do what the giants of the world would not. This is not just about one ship. It is about a new narrative. A small nation daring to do what the giants of the world would not. And that narrative is already spreading far beyond Africa. Across the Middle East, voices are praising Traoré's boldness. Palestinian leaders have expressed gratitude, calling Burkina Faso a true friend in their time of need. In Cairo, in Amman, in Ankara, newspapers are running headlines celebrating what they describe as an act of bravery from an unexpected corner of the globe. Traoré's name is now circulating in capitals, where African leaders are rarely mentioned. He is becoming a symbol of resistance and dignity. But with recognition comes retaliation. Israel has not taken this lightly. Defense officials are reportedly discussing naval patrols in the Mediterranean to ensure that any shipment heading for Gaza is strictly controlled. They argue that precedent cannot be set, that allowing Burkina Faso's aid to pass unchecked would open the door for others. The message is clear. If this ship moves, it will be watched, and if necessary, it will be stopped. That prospect raises fears of an international standoff that could escalate beyond anyone's control. In Washington, frustration is turning into strategy. Lawmakers are questioning whether Burkina Faso should face penalties for what some describe as destabilizing behavior. There is talk of freezing aid packages, suspending trade privileges, and pressuring regional allies to isolate Traoré's government. Behind closed doors, the calculus is simple. If Burkina Faso gets away with this, others might follow. The domino effect could weaken Western leverage in Africa, something Washington cannot afford to ignore. Meanwhile, within Burkina Faso, the atmosphere is charged with both hope and anxiety. Crowds celebrate in the streets, but business leaders whisper about sanctions, about frozen bank accounts, about the risk of losing vital markets. Farmers, traders, and students alike are aware that their president has taken them down a road of uncertainty. But for many, the sense of dignity outweighs the fear. For the first time in decades, they see themselves as active participants in shaping world affairs, not just passive recipients of foreign dictates. International organizations are caught in the middle. The United Nations has called for restraint, but stopped short of condemning the move. Human rights groups, however, are praising Traoré's decision, arguing that humanitarian action should not be politicized, and that civilians in Gaza desperately need relief regardless of political battles. Yet even within these organizations, divisions run deep. Some fear that supporting Burkina Faso will put them at odds with major Western donors, leaving them vulnerable to financial cutbacks. The global media narrative is equally polarized. In the West, coverage focuses on the risks, portraying Traoré as a reckless populist willing to jeopardize his nation for headlines. But across Africa and the Middle East, he is depicted as a rising hero, a man unafraid to challenge the world order. Social media amplifies this divide. Hashtags in support of Burkina Faso trend across multiple continents, while critics warn that social media momentum does not translate into real political security. Still, the fact remains. Traoré has sparked a global conversation. The stakes are now higher than ever. If the ship reaches Gaza safely, it will be a victory not just for Burkina Faso, but for every nation seeking to prove that sovereignty matters. If it is blocked, it will expose the lengths to which powerful states will go to maintain control. And that image could backfire, fueling even more anger against the West. Either outcome carries profound consequences. The voyage itself has become a test of international willpower. As this drama unfolds, one truth stands out. Africa is no longer silent. Burkina Faso, a small landlocked nation with limited resources, has forced its way into the global spotlight. And whether one views this as reckless or revolutionary, it cannot be ignored. The echoes of this decision will ripple far beyond Gaza's shores, far beyond the Mediterranean, and deep into the corridors of power from Washington to Brussels, from Tel Aviv to Moscow. President Traoré has drawn a line. He has declared to the world that Africa will not remain a bystander, that its leaders can act on conscience, not just on orders from powerful patrons. The question now is simple but profound. Will this gamble pay off? Or will it invite consequences too heavy for his nation to bear? The answer will not only define the future of Burkina Faso, but perhaps signal the beginning of a new chapter in global politics, one where the smallest nations remind the largest that courage still matters.